Hello and welcome to this week's What Were They Thinking? The first story this week is one in which Tesla drivers are behaving in boorish and stupid ways. They have been using the summon feature of their new Teslas in order to bring the car to them rather than go to the car themselves. This brings up rather obvious issues of how well an automatic car will detect hazards and, most importantly, people. In one video uploaded to YouTube, one Tesla owner decided to see whether or not their car would detect them when they used the summon feature. Somehow there is a suggestion that Tesla may have expected something like this, as they do point out that drivers are responsible for monitoring their vehicle at all times and those surroundings for the vehicle at all times, because they may not detect all obstacles. In a less intentional case of something stupid, the washing machines used in German hospitals may be spreading superbugs, and this has an especially significant impact on newborns. A recent inspection at a children's hospital in Germany found that infections in 13 newborns and one young child were all due to the medication-resistant bacteria Klebsiella oxytoca. The investigation found the source of this to be a washing machine on the floor that was used to launder garments. The washing machine in question was technically allowed to be used for this purpose, as it was outside the hospital's official laundry room, and was used for very limited applications, particularly maternal wear and certain baby wear items. In this case, the combination of location, which allowed the buildup of humidity, and exposure to certain bacteria that otherwise would not be around, meant that the washing machine became a perfect breeding place for this infection to become established. This is the distinction between what would happen in a home and what has happened in this German hospital. A home-based washing machine is unlikely to be exposed to such medication-resistant bacteria, and so it should be perfectly safe. In a hospital setting such as this, there is that chance of having a colony become established because of the nature of the location. In a strange case study, a 27-year-old man from China is becoming drunk even when not consuming alcohol. The Chinese man presented with a form of liver inflammation called non-alcoholic steatohepatitis and had a history of becoming drunk without having to drink any alcohol. This led to high blood alcohol readings of up to 400 milligrams per deciliter. That is a lot of alcohol. In fact, it's likely to be up to 8 or 12 times the legally prescribed amounts. This is important later. The cause was unknown for some time until the patient was given a platter of fruit and carbohydrates, more or less an average breakfast. From this, doctors were able to figure out that he had a rare condition known as autobrewery syndrome. This is a situation in which the flora of your gut ferment the foods that you are consuming and produce alcohol inside of you. This is then absorbed via the GI tract and you become intoxicated. There's never a need to consume alcohol, just regular food. The reason this is such an interesting case is that it is rare. The most common explanation for why this happens is that the gut flora has an overrepresentation of the Saccharomyces cerevisiae, or, as it is better known, brewer's yeast. After being treated with an antifungal medication, the condition should have gone away. However, the doctors at the hospital found that this just wasn't working. They had to go back in and examine him again to see what other possible bacteria could be causing it, and they found that it was a case of Klebsiella pneumoniae. Other research conducted following this found that it was both a high alcohol producing strain and one that found an increased representation in the guts of those who had otherwise been found in a similar situation. Hopefully with a targeted antibiotic and the ability to knock this particular variety down, the patient might at least be able to recover to some extent. In another unrelated mystery, one of the most deadly fungi species in the world, known as the reddish-orange poison fire coral, has just been found in Queensland, Australia. This is not a species native to the Great Southern Continent, which, whilst full of surprising, scary, and dangerous species of its own, is not known to play host to this particular fungi. It is found in most of Asia, but this includes the islands of Japan and the Java Islands. What is so worrying about this particularly brightly coloured fungus is that even a small amount being touched, and worse yet consumed, can cause your skin to begin to peel, hair to fall out, and considerable physiological symptoms ultimately leading to death. It was discovered by a self-proclaimed fungi fanatic. The Australian Tropical Herbarium confirmed the identity of the species recently, but they say it's likely to be a natural occurrence that has simply not been observed to date, that the spores would have arrived in Australia thousands of years ago and taken root. In other medically relevant news, the genome from the Black Plague has been traced back to Russia. Given Russia's stockpile of prospective bioweapons sourced from organisms and diseases like the Black Plague, this should be no surprise. The Black Plague itself, as has been identified here, killed an estimated 60% of Europe's population. It started in the mid-14th century and carried on for a further 500 years, with periodic lulls and periodic highs until eventually we began to gain control and prevent its spread. The Black Plague is better known by its proper name, Yersinia pestis. Researchers were able to reconstruct the genome of 34 different samples. These were taken from 34 different individuals who died in 10 different countries over a period of 300 years. This gives a very wide sample. The researchers were able to build a sort of family tree for the different cases as it spread both geographically and over time. They were calling these clades. Most importantly, the clades all seem to have a common singular starting point. That is, the entry into Europe of the Black Plague begins from Russia. Russia is a big place, and what is really interesting is that the researchers could narrow it down to not just a region within Russia, but a town. The Volga region holds the city of Lashevo, which has a relatively small population, but it appears to be where the Black Plague originated from. Of course, only being 34 samples, there is a possibility of error, and the researchers state as much. They do note that their sampling, given that they could only extract so much from so many bodies, and that they were limited in what they could sample, means that they may not have an entirely accurate representation. In similar medical news about finding the origins of a problem, The use of proton pump inhibitors might lead to an increased risk of stomach cancer. One study looking into this from 2017 found that the use of the proton pump inhibitor or PPI medication could double the risk of developing a cancer. The problem with this is that it occurs in conjunction with stomach ulcers and a bacterial infection by something called Helicobacter pylori. In fact, the ulcers and pylori are related, as was found by one Australian researcher who was able to demonstrate that after drinking the H. pylori cocktail he had prepared, he developed stomach ulcers, whereas he did not have them beforehand despite being stressed. The important part of this is that having the bacterial infection and using this medication is what appears to be linked with an increase. Having cleared the infection and taking the proton pump inhibitors for a short time, they are relatively safe. It is the long-term use that appears to be associated with an increased risk. This comes from a Hong Kong-based study that looked at just over 63,000 individuals. Most of these received the triple therapy method, that is, the use of the proton pump inhibitor and 2 antibiotics. After the antibiotics were no longer needed, the proton pump inhibitor was continued. This would normally be used to resolve heartburn and indigestion. To get the finding that the use of a proton pump inhibitor for extended periods caused an increased risk of cancer, researchers had to look at the patients who received treatment. Of the just over 63,000 who were initially enrolled, 153 developed stomach cancer. It is the patients who were on the proton pump inhibitors who were more likely, at 2.44-fold more likely, to get cancer. Those who were on an alternative treatment did not show any increased risk. What is important for this study is that it is an observational study, which limits its ability to both identify causality and how to intervene. This means there may be unidentified factors that are influencing the outcome, examples of which are socioeconomic, diet, or even environmental conditions. Even then, the risk factor only increases slightly. The 2.5-fold increase only creates 4 additional cases of stomach cancer per 10,000 people per year. All things considered, a relatively minor increase. In slightly more positive news relating to medical studies, there is strong evidence from a recent report that type 2 diabetes may be reversible. There has been historical evidence that extreme calorie restrictive diets can help to reduce, if not eliminate, type 2 diabetes. However, they are extremely difficult, time-consuming, and may not show results people want. The study used a cohort of 867 people between the ages of 40 and 69 with type 2 diabetes. They were all located in the east of England and followed for 5 years. Some of these people received further treatment, such as medical consultations. The control group received routine medical care, which is your advice to lose weight, exercise more, and generally try and maintain a healthy lifestyle. Of the experimental group, 257 or 30% were found to be in remission at the end of the 5 years. Of these 257, those who lost more than 10% of their body weight showed a more than double the chance of achieving diabetes remission than those who did not. As has been noted previously in other videos, gaining weight and then losing it is incredibly difficult, and achieving a greater than 10% body weight reduction is incredibly difficult. The authors of the study note that this may disenfranchise people with the notion of losing weight to remove their diabetes diagnoses. In slightly more light-hearted news, America's largest captive alligator has been found again after it went missing in floodwater. The alligator from Beaumont, Texas, was found recently after it became lost during Hurricane Harvey in 2017. The alligator, known as Big Tex, was 14 feet long and weighed 1,000 pounds. Through good fortune, Big Tex was found on the property of its owners, but not within the place it should have been kept. Therefore, it hadn't left the site so much as it was simply unaccounted for. Yes, an unaccounted for 15-foot, 1,000-pound alligator. That's going to help you sleep at night. The final piece of news this week is tech-related and has to do with how Words with Friends has supposedly been hacked, exposing 218 million users' accounts. A hacker by the name of Gnostic Player claims to have gained access to this information, which has put anyone who had an account before last month at risk of not only their Facebook account being accessed, but exposing much of their own personal information, such as your real name, email address, password, phone number, and more. The owner of the game, Zynga, has not given any official response to the hackers' claims. However, they did put out a post last month saying that there had been a possible data breach. Zynga claims that no financial or payment information has been exposed from this. Gnostic Player does not appear to have claimed to gain access to that information, and it may not have happened. However, if you are a user of the app, you may wish to consider changing your password for both that game and for any associated accounts such as Facebook. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions below.